I listened to David Roberts on the Dr. Volts podcast. He has that podcast that's very popular. I don't listen to a lot of episodes, but some of them, sometimes they come out and grab me. This one was on nuclear, and his guest was Jagar Shah, head of the Department of Energy Loan Programs in the U.S. government. The Department of Energy is all about nuclear, and that is, I think it was used to be the Atomic Energy Commission, and I think the Georgia reactor is the first one they actually saw from start to finish. But before that, it was formed around the time of 3 Mile Island, and there hasn't been squat. Anyway, here's the thing. He also said that if he tweeted the word nuclear bros would inundate him with, "What are you talking about? I don't like your tone."
Yeah.
There's so much heated debate on this subject that if I have it as the title of this podcast, I know that we're going to continue to get lots of negative likes on our YouTube channel. It's amazing how much negativity we have on our YouTube channel. If we talk about banning of gas cars, it's like 40% likes and the rest are hate. I don't know how they find us, the haters. Maybe they're bots. Maybe they're Russians. Maybe Putin himself is trying to keep the gas industry going. But it's amazing. There's 92 operating reactors in the United States, and no 4 of them are the same. That is one of the key points.
Wow.
They're all different technologies slightly.
Wow.
And that is something that has to change, but there's no active way of changing that. Now, they pointed out that the Vogtle nuclear reactors, the ones that, went way over time and way over budget by twice or more, they were adding 2 reactors to 2 reactors that already existed. So it's important to remember that wherever there's a nuclear reactor in America, there's space for 4. So you have that opportunity to put, in most cases, 2 more, and they build them in pairs because nuclear reactors, remember, are down 10% at the time, which is more than 1 month a year. In order to service them, you have to have them down. So it makes sense to have 2 reactors. The first reactor went terribly because they had to train people. There was 13,000 people trained, 9,000 on the site of that reactor. None of them knew what they were doing, and they had to backtrack and redo things, and it went slow. The second reactor cost about 30% less. So he argued that if you built the 4th one, it would probably be about 50% of the cost of the first one and be done in about half the time. And if that were to happen, if we were to standardize, but you can't do that. There's no effort to do that because you want the free market to do whatever it wants to do. And then, the government's paying for half of this. The federal government, the NRA, is paying for half of all nuclear reactors when it comes down to it. 30% here, 10% there, and another 10%, and all adds up to 50. And so you want to build multiple reactors. So that's one of the reasons why small modular, which he says will not be made in a factory. It's just not going to happen. They're going to be made on site. They're going to be smaller.
Yeah, well, this was the promise of small modular, nuclear reactors. Is the idea was that it's a standardized design. They're a bit smaller. You can perhaps make them in a factory and ship them out, and we could make lots of them quickly, but I guess maybe not so fast.
He joked that they were all snowflakes. They wanted to make snowflakes for nuclear reactors, individual, and no 2 were alike. But he said Canada got it better because we stuck with one design, and we just overhauled all of our designs and upgraded them. And apparently our workforce, because they were all the same, did a very good job. We also were more realistic about budget, so we didn't go over budget. We padded in contingencies and things like that. And so it worked out better for us. And he says the next reactor will be in Ontario as far as North America is concerned. But as far as the States are concerned, we don't know yet. So they would have to, if Brian, they standardized and went with one design for large-scale nuclear reactors or small, and kept making them, the learning curve would be enough to compete with solar plus storage, perhaps. But it's just not happening. We need it to happen yesterday. It's not happening, and that has to go. He said the people who built the last reactors retired or went into other trades, and cost estimates were not smartly done. They were stupidly done. And the country lost the ability, he says, to do big things. He says, we just agreed that China would do big things and we'll let them do it. And even with high-speed rail, they're having trouble with that in California. It's way over budget. And of course, some of it is land. People are saying, well, if you have to buy my land and you're screwed if you don't, I'm going to charge you a lot of money. But here's the thing. Microsoft alone, they are part owners or majority owners. I don't know. ChatGPT is now kind of theirs. And they need 10,000 megawatts, they figure, by 2030. Because all these companies, these tech companies, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they want to be neutral, carbon neutral by 2030. They're going to need like 8+ reactors just for ChatGPT by 2030.
Yeah, well, we've talked about how things like, cryptocurrencies take a lot of electricity, and in the glorious future that you and I might not live to see, well, we'll have abundant clean energy and none of these things will be an issue. AI, of course, AI is going to take a lot of electricity. NVIDIA, who makes computer chips, the company's just taking off because they make the kind of chips that are needed for AI. But yeah, you need a lot of power to run those chips. And so it's eventually all going to work out, I believe. But in the meantime, it's going to be a power crunch.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not even including everything else like Amazon, Meta, Google, Bitcoin, and, everybody who's decides that they're going to use AI, it's going to be very energy intensive and even uses water. Like you need to cool these places. So I got to thinking, well, we want to build some modular nuclear reactors in Canada, in our jurisdiction, in our province of 1.2 million people. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I'll get to that later. But maybe we should, if we did, maybe we should say, hey, Google, or hey, Microsoft, instead of building 2 reactors for our province, we'll build 4, and you come here and put your data center here. It's kind of cold in the wintertime, which is advantageous. It's cold out here today. It's minus 26 when I got up this morning in Celsius. Yeah, so it's only 3.5 megawatts of geothermal by 2030. Gigawatts of geothermal by 2030. It's nothing. That's they think 90 might be possible by the 2040s. But that's not a lot. So there's not a lot of geothermal potential even that they think, even on rosiest case scenarios of decarbonizing the grid, because it is a base load power and it is something you can turn off and on pretty quickly. Yeah, so you never make 1 reactor, you make 2, and all nuclear plants have room for 4, so that's something to consider. Because there's grid connections there too that should be good enough for 4 reactors when they're upgraded, and nukes, remember, are only on for 4% of the time. So yeah, so it's at the moment it doesn't compete with solar plus storage or the anticipated even reduction of solar plus storage, but it could perhaps do that. But I mean, is it even necessary? I don't know. We're going to talk about how some of the storage is taking off this year in 2024 later in the show. So with current nuclear plants paid off, the cost of just running the plants is 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. People think it's free. Well, 3.5 cents is kind of like what solar is. It's getting to be what solar is, or solar is getting close to that if it's not in certain regions of the world on large scale. So SMRs would be 5.5 cents. So they're more expensive because of the smaller scale. That's if they were paid off, Brian. That's not how much they'll cost,
Well, and you need things like security at nuclear power plants, and just the security costs alone that you don't necessarily need for, say, a solar farm.
And that's another reason for buying or, putting up more than 1 reactor, is because the security costs are essentially the same. And, that's a cost that's there all the time. The global weighted average levelized cost of energy, LCOE, for solar is currently around $50 per megawatt hour. That's an hour of 1,000 watts, or 1,000,000 watts rather, for solar, and 120 for solar plus storage. That's a lot. But this guy says It'll be $200 for solar plus storage. I'm not sure if that's true, but they expect the levelized cost of electricity to drop to $30 per megawatt hour by mid-century, with some individual project costs well under $20 per megawatt hour. And I think it'll be probably $25 by the early 2030s. So that leaves storage, which is 60% of the cost in the solar plus storage scenario. And if storage halves by the early 2030s, even his cost at $85 for solar plus storage before a couple of these plants even get online. I mean, that's not really going to be terribly competitive. So most people think, most reasonable people who are not nuclear pros and who are not just plain anti-nuclear because of the dangers of it, or perceived dangers of it, they're just, it's probably going to be a niche. It's probably not going to be the general solution to climate change. It'll be there in niche settings, perhaps for data centers, perhaps for northern regions. I don't know.
Yeah, or I've heard of things like making green hydrogen, things like that. But
that's another concept, because you know how we talk about what are they going to do when the sun shines and the wind blows? You turn off the nuclear reactor, and that kills it right there, because that makes, when you're not making electricity, it still only lasts 40, 60 years or whatever it is. So you divide all those hours and get the unit of electricity price. You turn it off and suddenly all of your units of electricity go up, because the major cost is building the plant. As they said, one idea that they're floating is using electrolyzers when the wholesale market is zero or negative. That's to say, when the wind is, there's lots of wind, there's lots of solar, and it's there, and you've got too much of it, and you certainly don't need nuclear, so the nuclear is not going to make any money. And at that point, you make electrolyzer. You use an electrolyzer to make hydrogen, which in turn is a stored power. When the sun is not shining, you'll have extra power. Again, though, no one's doing that. No one's planning to do that. That's just a solution to a problem that's come up at coffee, that they're not actually doing this. And we know that the time is here. So either the government or governments in other parts of the world says, hey, settle on one reactor, start making them, we'll help, we'll guarantee the overages with the risks and all that, and get the costs down. And this is what we're going to do when we hit the wholesale market is low. We're going to support you in making hydrogen. We're going to find a market for that hydrogen. And yeah, it's very complicated. So, in Canada, where we are, I think there's, we need about 4.5 gigawatts for our province here. So 2 full-scale reactors would pretty much do half of that. And that's probably why they're not accounting for more than 8% solar in 2050, which is absurd. But why mess around with small modular when you might as well just build a couple of, big nuclear reactors and invite a data center to go behind the fence of that and do that?
Yeah, well, you lose the economies of scale if you end up making them too small, because if nuclear is going to be expensive, well, then, a bigger plant makes more sense. And you mentioned that all the existing nuclear plants, most of them have a different design, and we're sort of headed down a path where the small modular reactors will be a different design, because every country is kind of trying their own thing.
Yeah.
And if we all got together and decided on one design, then, maybe we'd have something. But yeah, I don't know. I think here at the Clean Energy Show, like, we're on team solar, wind, and batteries, and, maybe nuclear's got a shot, but, you hear it all the time. People assume we're going to need nuclear, and, I don't think that's the case.
No, there is, I don't know if they're online or about to go online, but in China they have a couple of small modular reactors, so they'll be the first. But you can't go to the store and buy them. You can't order them now. They're still in development, and
yeah,
and they're expensive. And the theory is that they could be made cheaper by making a lot of them, but you have to agree on one worldwide, and then you have to make a lot of them. A lot of them.
Yeah, no, there's sort of 2 existing in China, which, as I understand it, are both different. They're not the same design. They're maybe not that small. They're built on site. They're not built in a factory, which is the dream, of course, of modular. But I don't know. Nuclear's got a long way to go.
There's also microreactors, which are 1 to 15 megawatts, and some of them can actually roll around on a truck. So you could, take them to a mine, or maybe maybe they're good for northern communities. We have northern communities in Canada that are isolated and are using diesel. They certainly could use solar. They certainly could use wind, but maybe this would be their backup is some sort of microreactor. But again, you have to make them, and they're not making them, Brian.
The Clean Energy Show.